And basically, I was in a mindset of, I just want to destroy myself and everything around me because I was in such pain. You know, I just continued to spiral down, man. And at 16, I ended up committing a very serious crime, the most serious crimes. And I took the life of a 19-year-old named Michael Mortensen. I was tried as an adult at the age of 16 and given a life sentence. I was given a 19 to life sentence, and I ended up spending a total of 21 years of incarceration on that sentence, 8 of which I spent in solitary confinement in Pelican Bay.
Yo, what's going on? Welcome to another episode of the It's Needed podcast, where we discuss real issues involving law enforcement in the community. It's your boy Ryan Tillman, founder of Breaking Barriers United, and I'm joined today by the light-skinned wonder himself, Mr. Oh No, It's the Popo. What's up, bro?
There
he is.
Man. I can't breathe right now, so I might have this Barry White voice for the whole podcast.
Broke shoulder and all. I see you gingerly when you trying to hold that little cup of coffee up.
It's this one. It's this one.
Okay.
Sympathetic.
We also are joined today by the savage himself, Mr. Billy, over here getting upset because he's trying to get stuff in order.
What's going on, guys? And hey, AJ, I forgot to ask, are you recording?
I'm recording, brother.
All right.
I appreciate you checking up.
Everyone knows our process.
Yeah,
now.
you know if he said no, bro, you know Billy was about to be enraged right now. He's about to set a little roid
I'm
rage.
about to activate the Hulk.
Today we are joined by another special guest. We've been having a lot of special guests lately. I met this guy probably about a few weeks ago, and Artie, man, when I talked to you, bro, your story is phenomenal. So immediately when I heard it, I was like, we got to have you on the podcast. And so the great thing about it is AJ or Billy have never heard you. Our fans have never heard you. And so this is going to be a great conversation. And so I want you guys to welcome special guest, Mr. Artie Gonz. Did I pronounce that right?
That's right.
Okay,
What's up?
cool.
Artie Gonz, everybody.
Okay, cool. I was making sure because they would mess me up if I didn't pronounce that correct. So how you doing today, man?
I'm good, brother. I'm good.
I respect the Lakers in the building. You know, we got Laker hat in the building. AJ over there, Cleveland Cavaliers. Do they even still got a team? Do y'all still have a team?
Bro, I don't know. Man. After this year, I don't know what's going on.
Do any of us still have a team?
Hey,
right?
I know, right? Hey, Cleveland.
Question.
Cleveland can finally use everything that's been going on as an excuse to get rid of all their professional sports, bro.
We'll take it.
Y'all now have a valid excuse to get rid of the Browns. Y'all can go ahead and get rid of the Cavaliers. Y'all can keep Ohio State.
Oh, we definitely keep it high.
y'all can keep them, man. So, current event, fellas, man. How are you guys feeling? Last time we talked, obviously we had it was the heels of George Floyd. We talked about that a little bit more in depth. Since that, man, it seems like things do not stop, man. We had another situation in Atlanta involving, the death of, I think it was Mr. Brooks at the hand of police, which, if you ask me, and I just did a take on this before you guys walked in, man. But, we've become a society that is we have this knee-jerk reaction when something crazy happens that all of a sudden we want to start passing certain laws or firing people without getting context. And on the flip side of that, we've also had, officers think that we can't do no wrong, which obviously it's inevitable that we do wrong. And so we got to find this place in the middle, and it's upsetting because coming on the heels of George Floyd, you have two officers that shot one officer shot the guy. The officer that shot him was fired immediately, and now he's being charged for homicide, which is normal. I want people to understand that is when they say it's being charged as a homicide, that's how all investigations start. So, I mean, if you kill somebody, it's not like it's abnormal to say, hey, we're charging you or you're not being charged for homicide. So that's not abnormal. But what it was abnormal is that they fired him immediately. The chief stepped down, offered pressure from the mayor. And my thing is like, man, they didn't even give this any time to do any research, investigation into it. They just made an impulsive decision, if you ask me, which, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the same mayor that put the pressure on the chief to fire to resign was the same lady that said that a taser could be a lethal force option a few weeks prior to that, when their officers used a taser on a few people, college students, that wasn't justified. So that same mayor who said the taser can be used or considered a lethal force was the same lady that also said that this officer needed to be fired because a taser is a less than lethal option, and therefore, and all this other stuff. So anyways, that's one of the things we have in trending and current events. We got to get back to doing our Officer Down Memorial. We haven't done it in a while, but there have been a lot of officers that have died this year from either COVID-19 or related to, ambushes. I know the officer that was shot in the back of his head in Vegas, he didn't die, thank God, but he's paralyzed now. So that happened a few weeks ago. So we're trending with that. In other news, sports is coming back. I heard the NBA is coming back in August or September, one of them.
You got me, man. Cleveland Cavaliers, man. I'm out here just.
It's understandable why you wouldn't know. So us Laker fans, though, this is our year.
We were having the most phenomenal season, and then this happened.
And they played us. I think it's a conspiracy, bro. You asked me, conspiracy. COVID-19 was a conspiracy. They didn't want the Lakers to win the ship, so that's why they started it. Just saying.
Right.
Just saying. So we had that, and it's just been busy, man. So, but let's get right into it. When we have special guests, I want to dive right in because we owe it to our listeners to hear your story and figure out ways that we can connect. So the way me and Artie got connected, just so you guys know, we met through a mutual friend on Instagram, and it's so crazy how social media works because it puts people together from all over the world. And, prior to social media, being able to be on platforms with, people of status was unheard of. And now you can be on the similar platform that people have influence and all that stuff just because of social media. So long story short, this guy by the name of Brad put us together, and thank God for Brad. Brad's a phenomenal dude. He linked us together and said, you got to meet this dude, Artie. So Artie hit me up. We talked on the phone, and his story is powerful. So Artie, let's get into who you are, man. Tell all of us, AJ, Billy, all of our listeners included, who you are, man, and what your story is.
All right, cool. Let's get into it. So I'm Artie Gonz, and I have a couple different sides, I would say, to myself. Currently, I work in the film industry.
Okay.
I'm a writer. I produce my own content, and at the same time, like my day job, I'm a location manager and location scout for television shows.
Nice.
Currently working on the morning show for Apple TV.
So what does that work? How does that work? You just go out there and look for new places?
Yeah, I'll read a script for an episode, and I will try to go find that in real life, and then make connections with people, take pictures, get to see some really great things and meet great people, and then show that to producers and production designers. And if they like the location, then we start doing the contracts.
We got to go to AJ's hood. I'm just saying.
Cali is crazy. Cali is a whole other world, man.
We got to go to AJ's
There's
hood.
a little bit of something for everybody
That's cool. Okay, cool. So continue.
So that's what I do right now. That's my day job, and I love it, man. Like, working in the film industry has been a lifelong passion of mine, a lifelong dream. I started out very young, on doing musicals and like acting on stage, and right before I was going to start doing headshots and thinking about commercials and all that kind of stuff, my grandmother died. And to that point, she had really been like the most influential bright spot in my life. As you saw in my teaser. So it really had like this transformational, fundamental, like huge impact on me when she died. And I perceived her death as an end for me, so out went the dreams of acting and film industry, and at least temporarily, right? And out went hope, and out went compassion and love and empathy and all these great things, all these great aspects of myself I had up to that point. We're completely lost in pain and fear, resentment.
That's a good point you bring up. And before we move forward, I want to talk about that is, the transformation that we have as people because of emotional ties that we either have to a person or situations. And I think sometimes we, overlook that. If you look at a lot of the incidents that's been going on, the death of Mr. Brooks, the death of George Floyd, and you get so wrapped up emotionally. And right now we've been emotionally charged up because of race in our country. We've been so divided because of race. And, so the reason I bring that up is because, it's crazy. I want to highlight the fact of how emotions play in our life. So that being said, you had these aspirations of going out doing, getting into the film industry. So you had these aspirations since you were young. So it wasn't
Very
like this
small.
just popped up.
No.
You had always had
I was
these
one of those
aspirations.
kids that was born and knew immediately what he wanted to do for a living.
Nice.
Like,
So grandmother passes away, and then after that, what happened?
okay, so the great news is this is a full circle story.
Mm-hmm.
So all of that happened, and feelings and the emotions that we just talked about, I went through all of that. And I really didn't feel like I had any direction anymore at that point, or anyone I could rely on, lean on. If I did have options, I wasn't aware of them. I grew up in an impoverished community in the east side of San Jose, up in the Bay Area.
Yeah.
Which is a lot like East LA culturally. And in any case, so after she passed, I went on this downward spiral, and I ended up out in the streets, and that became my new family.
Man.
And I started gangbanging, and I was probably about 13 when I got jumped in. And the gangs lead to parties, which leads to drugs, and so I started that whole lifestyle of gang violence, drugs, and basically I was in a mindset of, I just want to destroy myself and everything around me, because I was in such pain.
Yeah.
Of course, these are things I didn't explore until much later in life. But I know now that's what I was going through, right? So fast forward, I'm 16 years old, and I had been really, really bad for the previous 3 years. I mean, just getting worse and worse and worse. I had police contact within those 3 years already for minor things. I had already done some juvenile hall time for I stole a car.
Wow. How old were you when you stole a car?
Probably like 15.
Wow.
And that's the one I got caught for. You know what I mean? Like,
Wow.
I was doing really,
yeah.
I was doing really bad things. And the funny thing is, I didn't even know how to drive, dude. Like,
That's how you learn.
yeah, my thing was I would get the damn car and just get it somewhere close by without hitting too many mailboxes, and then call them to pick it up. But in any case, I just continued to spiral down, man. And at 16, I ended up committing a very serious crime, the most serious crimes. And I took the life of a 19-year-old named Michael Mortensen. And this happened right in front of my home.
Wow.
Yeah. And back then, this is 1994, and we are talking about juvenile offenders being labeled as super predators and all of this. And I didn't know the climate that I was in. Didn't matter. I mean, I did what I did. I took the life of this young man, and I was tried as an adult at the age of 16 and given a life sentence. I was given a 19 to life sentence, and I ended up spending a total of 21 years of incarceration on that sentence, 8 of which I spent in solitary confinement in Pelican Bay.
Wow.
So, I mean, we can get more into that if you want. I'm an open book.
Yeah, so there's a lot to unpack there, man. Because I mean that's not a normal life for you guys. Well, it's normal life for some, but it's not a normal life for others. I was just having this conversation with a partner of mine last night, and we were talking about, as a police officer, we deal with a lot of different people, and unfortunately sometimes we get so wrapped up in this, and correct me if I'm wrong, AJ, we get so wrapped up in this mindset where you just deal with people all the time, and you start to lose this empathy for people. And it's like that mentality of like, you make your bed, you sleep in it, which a lot of times we need to stop ourselves and pump our brakes as police officers, because it's like, you don't know what a person's going through. You don't know where they've been. Yeah, they've made a mistake. And I always tell people, like, my job is not to judge you. I have a job to do, but I'm not going to judge you because I don't know where you come from. And so we have to be careful on doing that as police officers, because I don't know what you were going through. So now let's go back to the situation when you committed the crime, and how that weighed on you, how that weighed on your family. Did you at the time have any remorse, or did you start getting remorse later, after you realized what you had actually done?
Initially, no. No remorse, no genuine understanding, things like causative factors. How does someone become capable of committing a crime such as that in the first place? These things I did not explore until later. I sort of chalked it up to I was living a lifestyle, and these are the things that happened in that lifestyle, right? Which is essentially not taking responsibility at all, not owning it, and therefore not growing. So that didn't happen until later in life, but it did.
Yeah.
Instead, I continued to devolve from that point. I went in and I just got worse and worse. And I actually was sent to prison at 18. And they sent me first to Pelican Bay. That was my first prison.
And Pelican Bay is like the worst of the worst, right?
Dude, yeah. And in the mid 90s, oh man.
So going in there as an 18-year-old, what's your emotions? Scary?
I was, if I'm being honest, I was very afraid, but not able to show that. So yeah. I focused that fear into something else, like anger or aggression. Back then we had like weights on the yard. So imagine an 18-year-old who's maybe 115, 120 pounds stepping onto a yard that has people who are 6'8", 6'6", 350 pounds, and they're all muscle. Like people were bench pressing 500 pounds easy back then. So to step into that environment was definitely scary, But
you can't wear that emotion. Like you gotta come in there like, hey, look, I'm not gonna take no crap, right?
Yeah, and because if you do show that sign of weakness is like blood to a shark. You know what I mean? So you go in, and I was a part of a gang, remember? So I was embraced by that gang when I went in, and they do what they do. Very great at taking young minds and reshaping them for their purposes, which is what happened to me. They took me in, they put me in with someone older who had been down for a while, and this guy started to educate me on what we were, how we thought,
And so not the positive education, like, hey, 2 + 2 is 4, and like
right.
Hey, like this is okay.
And it's very confusing to a young mind because on one hand, some of what they're teaching you is very pro-social and positive, like conduct yourself with respect, act professional, like even towards your enemies, you want to be courteous. You don't steal from others. You don't debase yourself. You carry yourself at a higher level as a gang member, right?
Wow.
So they instill that in you. But the flip side is sometimes violence is the option. And sometimes we have to make money, and this is how we do it. And so to a young mind that's grasping for a safety net or acceptance or love, I mean, it's very confusing, and you end up losing yourself in it. And I certainly did. Now, keep in mind, I didn't think I was ever going to come home. I had a life sentence.
Yeah.
So my thing early on was, this is all I have left. If I do not succeed at this, I have nothing. So I allowed my entire sense of identity to be shaped in this way until one day it was the only way I identified, and I knew nothing else apart from it.
Wow. So you go, and AJ, I know you have some questions because I can see you taking notes over there as well. One of my questions is racism is real inside the walls, right?
Man.
so right now we're living in a country that's divided by race.
Yeah.
And one of the things I said, and I was just talking, and sometimes I'll ramble. Maybe I think I actually ramble. I said this on the last podcast. I did actually, but I'm gonna say it again. Is it goes like this as soon as I freaking find it.
And it goes a little something like
this. Golly. Oh, here it goes. So racism still exists, but yet we can't say everything is racist because then we can't determine what really is racist. So outside the walls, we're dealing with a lot of people that are saying that there's a lot of racially driven, killings by police officers to black men and so forth and so on. Tell me what the racism was like inside the walls, because that, if I'm not mistaken, is pretty blatant.
Yeah. So I actually thought a lot about what am I gonna say and what am I not gonna say with Ryan today, right? What am I gonna put on the record and not put on the record, right? Because
Yeah.
I had to think about that. Like right now I'm in a position where I I want to amplify and support Black voices. Right now is the time for that. And so there's a part of me that knows decenter and allow them to be at the forefront of their own movement.
Yeah.
And then support as an ally, right? Know your position, play your role,
exactly.
all that good stuff. So there's that part of it. And then there's the other part, which is like, well, I can relate my experience with racism because I am certainly familiar with real racism. Like, so we're talking about the prison culture, right? In California prisons right now, it's 2020. I guarantee you step in there as a prisoner, it's 1965. It is segregated toilets, showers, phones, segregated sinks, tables. People are very separate. That's the white area. That's the Black area. That's the Mexican area. That's the Asians over there. That's,
oh my goodness.
and that's how it is. Like, so as soon as you step in, you are definitely in a segregated environment, but in a very small world, right? Apart from that, then there's the racism that you do deal with, because a lot what's been on the forefront a lot right now is police brutality and you know, like you talked about racism in law enforcement, and when you go in there, you will definitely experience that, but from the guards, right? In a major way. I've definitely been subjected to it. I've been stripped. I've been gassed, humiliated. I've been put in cages, threatened with violence.
Wow.
I remember one time, man, I stepped off a bus. And as soon as I stepped off the bus, a big white cop comes up to me and he says, hey, stare up at the sky. So I look up at the sky. He goes, if you look down, I'm going to beat your. Don't look down until I tell you to look down. All right. And I was like, okay. I mean, it's a blue sky anyway, and I haven't seen one in a long time. So I'm just
exactly.
Right. So
soak this in.
Yeah.
right.
Wow.
So thank you. So anyways, so I look up and he's, but it immediately, it was like, as soon as you step off the bus, we want you to know this is ours. It's basically white power here, and we are the structure that's in charge here. So you guys can kill each other and do whatever you want to do, but we are in charge of this facility. And that is very widespread. Now, that's what happens to me. What I seen happen to Black people in prison was many times worse. And that's just the guards. Then you bring in the level of racism from white gangs and white supremacists in prison, right? We're talking skinheads, we're talking Aryans, we're talking, and what you end up with is a culture that is just layered with racism. So basically that's how I lived for like the whole 21 years.
Man, go ahead, AJ, because I know I see you over there pondering.
Yeah, it's a lot. You got to excuse my baby crying. I think I can probably hear him.
No, we told him this is a family podcast.
What's that?
I said we told him this is a family podcast, bro.
Yeah, this the real deal. So yeah, it's definitely a lot to unbox. The first question I have is, did you understand the severity of what you did when you were 16, correct?
I was.
Did you understand like the severity of what you did when you were 16? The reason I asked is because you said you were tried as an adult, and clearly talking to you now, I didn't know you when you were 16, but I would be willing to bet all of my money that you are a completely different person than you were when you were 16, when you were tried as an adult.
Yeah. Right. I certainly did not have that understanding. I remember getting sentenced when they gave me the life sentence. It was like I knew it was coming, and I still didn't understand that it had happened to me.
Wow.
You know, and I still didn't understand, like, when my public defender was telling me, you'll be out by 40. You know, you don't understand in your mind, like, he just said 40. You know, like, you're not really grasping what that means. So
right.
That level of confusion I talked about when I went in is the same level of confusion I had throughout the legal process. You know.
So what was the turning point for you? You know, there had to be a point in your life where you decided to, I don't want to use the term wake up, but you decided to at least take a step back reevaluate things and go, okay, maybe I should try this instead of what I've been trying. So can you tell us what the turning point was and break that down for us?
I remember the exact day. I remember the moment. It definitely was a moment. So I'm just gonna say that, in a broad stroke here, I elevated in the prison gang that I was a part of. Right, I worked my way up the ladder. By the time I was 22, 23, I already had my own yard. Like,
wow.
I was already doing things, right? So by the time I had this moment, I had been in Pelican Bay in the solitary confinement Supermax facility for almost 8 years. And I'm sitting in my cell, no direct sunlight. I haven't touched a human being, like not even like this, dude, in like years, right? I hadn't seen the sun in years. The most I saw was like a patch of blue sky when I would go to my little concrete yard.
Oh my goodness.
For years, right? I've seen people go crazy in there. Perfectly sane people lose their mind, but that's why it's built like that.
Yeah.
It was made to attack your it's sensory deprivation.
Yeah.
Meant to break gang members. But anyway, I'm thriving in this environment, believe it or not.
My man was like, man, King Kong ain't got nothing on me.
Right? Yeah, I'm thriving. Like I that building I lived in, that was my building.
Yeah, this my
like
this
I
my
ran
house.
that. That was my house.
It's my house, y'all.
Yeah. And so you find a comfort in that in some way, but that's just the mind adapting, right? So and refusing to like be broken or shattered or whatever.
Yeah.
So but at the same time, I had been having at that point, you start to evolve where you start questioning what you're a part of, because you start to see cracks in the facade. And
That's a good way to say it.
Yeah, the older I got, like mid-20s to almost 30, the more I started saying, well, we teach that we're doing this for our race and our people, but yet my biggest enemy looks just like me.
Wow.
And just happens to live in Southern California and I live in Northern California. What the hell? Like,
that's deep.
That's not unity. Like, you're telling me I'm fighting for unity, but if actually what I'm fighting for is the opposite of that. I'm like dividing a people right now. I'm not bettering my communities. I'm not doing anything positive for my heritage or my nationality or anything like that. Actually, I'm a stain. Like,
wow.
So I started to push for reforms, right? Believe it or not.
Wow.
I started to push for reforms. And what I was getting from people higher than me was, it's not your time. When it's your time, you can have reforms. And for now, the status quo remains in effect. And we are not going to even talk about that. By the way, fast forward, they did end up calling like a cessation of hostilities, and like, everything I was pushing for eventually happened, but it was years down, right? But I was pushing for it and I was being told no. And those answers were not satisfactory for me, because I didn't sign up for this. I'm telling myself in the cell, right, as I'm struggling internally, I didn't sign up to be a drug dealer or to make money like that, or like I'm a true believer in some cause that's been brainwashed into me, right? And so if I'm not fighting for that, then I'm just wasting my life. And that moment that I was going to tell you I'm sitting in my cell, and I don't know why, I don't know how, but sunlight, it comes through the roof sometimes, because there's like those, like those glass things on top. I felt it on my hand. And I looked down and I saw like light on my hand. And it was in that moment that I was like, what the am I doing with my life? Like, I'm not meant to live this way. I was supposed to be doing something else. And I can't do this anymore. Like, I have to start today to make the decision. And I did, man. Like, I let them know I was leaving. I let them know I was done. I know that put my life in danger. But it was the right thing to do. And it started from that moment. It took 2 more years for me to get out of solitary, because they didn't believe me that I was done.
Wow.
So it took 2 more years to get out. And then when I did, during those 2 years, I started to like embrace recovery and 12 steps. And once I walked away from the gang life, you have to understand I had no identity.
Yeah, you're lost now.
I'm a blank slate.
Because you have no people to identify with. Nothing.
I don't. I'm a man without a country. I have
Wow.
nothing. I would stare at myself in the mirror in the shower and I was just like blankly. I didn't know who I was. So I was grasping, and I found recovery, and I found 12 steps and all this. And I started to slowly reconnect with my former self. The one that wanted to be in Hollywood, the one that loved his grandma, the one that would help a woman across the street, or, I started to reconnect with that part of myself, but it took a few more years to like really become natural again.
So what's crazy in all this is that, here's the irony in this is you have 2 people or 3 people, 4 people, very similar, but on the exact opposite ends of the spectrum. Like, I look about getting into police work and, early on seeing like there needs to be some type of reform, you know what I mean? Getting pushback from the top, you know what I mean? But knowing that there's more and that we can do more, and finding it hard, but yet we're on the opposite ends of the spectrum, seeing officers doing things that they shouldn't be doing and saying, that's not what I signed up for. So that part is crazy. I mean, the other thing that I want to highlight right now is before we move on to the glory and all this story, because, man, you have a powerful story. But one of the things I want to touch on right now is that in our country, because of this pendulum that's swinging, like I said, we have the knee-jerk reaction, either go far left or far right. There are people out there that believe we need to just get rid of police. So from the criminal element side of things, I want you to talk about this criminal element that exists, not just in prison, but how the prisons also govern what's going on the street, and how there's people out there that prey on people, you know what I mean? Whether it be through, heinous crimes or stealing or drugs, because we have to all agree, and we can agree to disagree, but we have to all come to some type of agreement that we need some form of policing, irregardless. Like, because if you don't, people are going to get taken advantage of. They already do with police. And so I want you to be able, can you tell me from somebody that's been locked up and done the worst of the worst, I guess we can all agree on that, do you think that there's a need for police?
Yes. And I will say there's 2 things I want to say about that.
Okay.
The first is there's definitely a connect between what's going on in prison and the streets. Mm-hmm. That connect has always existed. It always will, as long as they exist, right?
Can you explain that a little bit for some of our listeners if they don't understand what that means?
Sure. So you have, think of having a company that has operations. One has operations in California, and the other one has operations in Nevada, but they're all part of the same corporation. Mm-hmm. Essentially, that's what the mob is, or the mafia, or the, you know what I mean? That's essentially how they operate. So you have prison industry and you have street industry. And both aspects have CEOs, but they all work with each other under one umbrella, one corporation.
Got it.
So that's really how that works. So there always was that connection, and I was always focused more on the in-prison side of what I was a part of, because I didn't think I was going home.
Yeah, because you're in serving a life sentence.
Right.
So.
But I always knew, like, there's a lot of us out here on the streets, and someone is overseeing that.
Yeah.
And how that's going. So that does exist. The second thing that I wanted to say is that wouldn't it be nice? I mean, it's very idealistic, right? Mm-hmm. Right now, I'm hearing all the calls. I am for, like, we just need to abolish the police altogether. Okay. It is idealistic, right? It would be lovely for us to live in a society where police were not necessary.
Without a doubt.
Where we had a crimeless society.
Without a doubt.
Would be amazing, right?
Yeah.
Like, and here's the thing, that's still the goal.
Yeah.
That should always be the goal.
Yeah.
Right? Less criminals is less crime,
Without a doubt.
less victims.
Without a doubt.
So I want to state that first, right? That being said, I feel like the path to that is a process. I feel like it's not something that can happen in a single stroke or a single moment. That's just not the way it operates or it works, right? So it's going to be a process. And in the process of that, there are things that we can do to help usher and nurture that process, right? So that's how I feel about policing right now. It's like, it's definitely a very serious issue, and so many people have been affected by it on both sides,
100%.
right? But I feel like there's a certain role to play. And like I told myself, one of the things that I told myself before I came, I was like, I'm going to talk to Ryan, but I think I'm going to, I'm going to avoid certain things, right? Like, because there are people who are much more qualified than I am, who are already working on these issues nationally, federally, qualified immunity,
Yeah.
diverting programs and like, resources, and also, what was the other one? I can't think of it right now, but this is already happening above me. I'm focused on how can I help at my local level, my community level. What can I do now? And one of the things that I feel about policing is I met you. You are someone who already works on the inside. Both of you do. You both work on the inside, and you both view your job through a certain prism that is different than what we are seeing on media, right?
Exactly.
So these are the kind of police officers that I feel we need to align ourselves with, not push away from ourselves, because these are allies in the fight.
Exactly.
A lot of times you probably struggle, same thing with higher ups that just aren't listening to some of the things that you're pushing, right?
Yep.
And then the second aspect of this is, as things continue to evolve in policing, which I feel that they will, right? We need to see more black and brown faces in uniform who come from our communities, who understand how people operate and where they, culturally, because then that affects the level of and kind of policing.
Yeah, it does. Without a doubt. I had this conversation with a partner of mine last night, and, I saw this black guy last night at the gas station, and really cool guy. And, you can tell I just from where I'm at, you can tell he's probably from the neighborhood and stuff like that. But as opposed to having that posture of like, oh shoot, he's probably up to no good, I was like, hey, what's going on, man? You got a nice car? Like, what's going on, man? And we just start chopping it up, like. And we have to get to a place in law enforcement where we can have casual conversations with people beyond just always trying to see if they're doing something shady. Don't get me wrong. I'm a firm believer in, like, every dog has his day. And like you said earlier, like, when you stole the car, there was many ones that you stole, you just never got caught for it. Every dog will have his day. If you're doing something, like, I'm a firm believer, if you're doing something you're not supposed to be doing, most likely in some way or shape or form, karma is going to come back and get you. So knowing that, I'm not always out there trying to, criticize or judge a person based off of the way they look, just because I'm a human being. I have a job to do. And me and AJ, all of us are committed. And you said something that was profound, is that we have to be able to get into and do things at the ground level. And we can. We don't have to have a seat at the highest table. We've seen, how many movements have we seen come from ground level? I mean, take Black Lives Matter. Whether a person agrees with Black Lives Matter or they don't, that organization started ground roots, grassroots, whatever it may be. And so there's so many other organizations, whether people agree or they don't agree, that starts grassroots. But we got to be able to be transparent with one another and be able to have that dialogues. I mean, imagine this. This is crazy. The mere fact that you have two cops, a civilian, and a guy that's, two civilians, but a guy that's formerly convicted for homicide, sentenced to life prison, having a discussion and just chopping it up is like, and I think the larger aspect of that is I want to talk about the forgiveness aspect of it. And I don't know if you've ever thought about that in your life, but for me, I'm a Christian guy, and, my faith is huge because that's the only thing for me that kind of allows me to put all this together, which makes me not judge your actions, because I realize, like, man, you may have done one thing, and it may be in the humanistic view, like, oh well, that crime is way worse than my sin, but in God's eyes, it's all the same. And there's so many people in the Bible that committed hundreds of murders that were still ultimately forgiven by God. And so having that and knowing that, that's what gives me the peace that I need to know, like, I don't have to sit here and judge you based off of something you did in the past. I can still embrace you as my brother, because you know what? We all have to meet our maker one day, but if God can forgive me, then I need to be able to forgive my brother, you know what I mean? And sister, whatever it may be. And so I want to touch on that piece. So how have you dealt knowing, because there's, again, on the flip side, there's officers that have taken another person's life. I've been close to taking another person's life. So how do you deal with that, now? Because that, I'm sure you think about it or have thought about it, and I don't know if you're still connected with the family or not, but I'm sure that's probably played a level on your mind.
Well, it definitely did. What I want to say before I say that, though, is that, because you made me think of something, I have been the victim of extreme prejudice and racism and bias, all the things that we're fighting about right now. Like, I have directly been impacted by it several times.
Wow.
Right? For the majority of my life. And like I said, I lived in 1965, man. You know what I mean? In the current age.
Yeah.
So I feel like I was in the deep South, but in California. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I have every single reason to not even be here and ever talking to you or any police officer, right? I have every reason. But I say that to say I am here because I understand that these conversations have to happen. They may be uncomfortable, but they have to happen. Someone has to have the courage, and I feel that that's what we're doing here.
That's it.
I feel that's where transformation comes from and affecting real change, right? And also anyone who knows me knows, like Artie Gonz, he's willing to have the conversation, bro.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, I could tell the
uncomfortable or
first
not.
time I talked to you, I was like, oh man, Artie seems like good people. And you're so right, man. Like, and we need, if you're listening to this podcast, you got to understand you can't be oblivious and say that racism does not exist. I've said it before. It's living proof. We have criminal justice, facilities across the country, i.e. prisons, where racism is still alive. There ain't nobody inside those prisons right now trying to say, we need to all be peaceful with each other. Let's kumbaya this and let's no. And like, I don't want to say it's encouraged because I don't know. I'm not in there, but ain't nobody trying to stop it. So people get out of prison. Not everybody's in there. Not everybody's in there on a life sentence. So when they get out, things don't just necessarily change overnight. Whether you're white, black, Asian, Hispanic, you got to realize. And so that right there is proof in and of itself that racism still exists. But like you said, conversations need to be had like this. The last episode was called "We Have to Be Comfortable Being Uncomfortable." So that's what needs to happen. AJ, go ahead, take it over because I know.
Man, I got a whole note. I'm over here jotting, man. Man, first off, thank you for coming, man. Thank you for coming.
Yeah.
Thank you
Without
for
a
sharing your
doubt.
story.
Without a doubt.
It's extremely inspirational to us, and I know that it will be extremely inspirational to everyone who listens to this. With that said, there's always a lot of talk about change, right? Whether it's change in the police department, whether it's change in the communities, whether it's change with racism, whatever, right? There's constant talk about change, and people are always trying to figure out the recipe, what's the best way to attack it. And listening to your story, I'm writing down these notes, and one of the things you said is those answers were not satisfactory for me, right? Which told me like you believed in something much bigger than where you were at, and you refused to accept those answers. So what you did in your mind is you flipped the switch. You said, you know what? I'm no longer going to be a victim. I'm going to be a victor, right? I'm going to take everything that I've went through in my life, and I'm going to utilize it to propel myself towards the goal that I want to accomplish, or the goals that I want to accomplish, or the message that I want to spread. So I wrote that down. I put a star beside it, and I put a number 1 because in my mind, I'm like, you know what? That has to be the first step, right? Like you have to believe in something bigger than yourself, so big and so inspirational that despite what happens to you, despite how many times you're told no, that answer is not satisfying me. Like, I don't want that answer. I'm going to do what I have to do to change that. So then on the next page, I'm writing things down, and you talked about you were in a gang when you were a juvenile, and when you went to prison, that gang, continued to watch over you. They continue to guide you and how you moved up through that. So the second thing I wrote down is relationships, and I put down a number 2 beside it. And the reason I did that is because I feel like relationships would be a second step towards implementing change, right? So once you believe in your head, I'm not going to be a victim no more. I'm going to believe in something. I'm going to take the necessary steps. Then you have to build relationships, which is what we're doing now, right? And that's a direct correlation between like the conversation, right? Like the conversation has to be had. But even deeper than that, when you have a conversation, a genuine conversation with somebody, what do you build? You build relationships with that person. And then you start to see, right? Like talking to you, you're like, look, you go to prison in California right now, it's a black water fountain, it's a white water fountain, it's a Hispanic water fountain. That's opening our eyes as police officers. So when we go back to the precincts or when we go back to the police departments that we work at, we could tell our coworkers like, hey, you know, this is still going on. Like I just talked to somebody. And now that you have a relationship with us, hopefully you could take something from us and go back to your constituents and go, hey, look, this is what I learned today, or this is what I heard today from police officers. So the whole thing is just super inspiring. And what I'm curious is, how was the first day you got out?
Oh,
like,
man.
It had to be like stepping out of a time capsule, but you had to be so on fire that it had to be even more unique than normal.
I still think back, and that was 5 years ago, just about. Man, that was definitely a surreal moment, man. I just wanted you guys to know that, because I don't want to leave out the part of I am the product of years and years of processing and recovery. So when you talk about forgiveness, I operate in a spiritual way, right? That's who I am today. Everything about me is spiritual balance.
Nice.
Connectivity. So that's like innately now who I am, right? And it took years and years to get to that point. But what happened was I changed so fundamentally that when I went to the parole board in 2014, it was night and day from my last one. They were like, you have completely, like, this is black and white, you know?
Wow.
And a law had passed which had allowed me to be given extra consideration due to my juvenile age at the time. This was called SB 260.
Okay.
Right? And it required boards to look at juveniles tried as adults in a different way. And so they took that, and it's really what got me home, you know? It really is. I mean, shout out to the Anti-Recidivism Coalition and Human Rights Watch.
Well, and that's a good point that you bring up, because a lot of times we have a habit as law enforcement. You see these laws that get passed to, you know, let people out early or things like that. And granted, in many ways, I don't agree with some of them, because I'm just like, yeah, we gotta be careful on who we're letting out, because we have a lot of repeat offenders that go right back. But at the same time, you have those like yourself that are a benefit, that law was a benefit for. And so we can't always get wrapped up in thinking, oh, this is freaking stupid, we shouldn't be doing this. Everything needs balance. And with that being said, you're the product of, or the success story of, something that was passed, you know what I mean? Because you were able to come out, and now that's what I want to transition into.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to answer his question.
Oh, yeah, go. Yeah, my bad.
But what I was getting to was
AJ about to get mad. He's like, so you just going to bypass
no,
my
you just going to bypass me, huh? Okay, because I'm on the laptop. All right. What I was going to say was that it was night and day, and I had transformed to such a level. But I like to use my platform to show that I am proof that rehabilitation works. Funding programs and incentivizing release and programs like that works. So we definitely need resources for that, right? We definitely need that. We need that out here. Like, we need more programs out here to deal with, especially youth, before they become too wrapped up in that system, right? So that needs to start happening. And because I am proof that it works, it's like you can actually fundamentally change someone if you could just get to the heart of them and the spirit of them.
Man.
Right? So fast forward, I get out, it's 2015. The day I get out, I was like, I couldn't believe it.
And you've been in there for 21 years now, right?
21 years. I went to put on like my first people clothes before they let me out. My brother and them, they had sent me some clothes, and I had to remember like how to put a belt on. Right.
Wow.
Because we didn't have belts in there. So
that's crazy.
So I put the belt on. They put me in a van, and they took me out to like where the pickup area outside. And I had already told myself, I'm not looking back. I'm not going to look back at this prison. I'm going to get in the vehicle, and I'm going forward only. Right. So that's what I did. And I had my family members there, and they're holding up welcome home signs.
Oh, that's cool.
And my mom, she was just like overwhelmed. And they took me directly to like this Mexican restaurant in Merced. And I had my first meal, man, and I was
Probably
cool.
tore your stomach up.
It did, actually. That's the whole other thing,
Stomach
right?
didn't know how to react.
We could do a whole podcast on bubble guts when you come home, but I definitely was like, I didn't know how to order or anything like that, and I had this great meal, and I was cool, man. I was actually really great at that time. We continued driving down south, and then we get off at this gas station to gas up, and a lot of the gas stations, they have the market, so you go into the market, and I'm just looking in all these choices, and I can't believe it. I go into the bathroom. I didn't know how to operate the faucet with your hands.
Wow.
The motion.
Yeah.
So I'm stuck, like trying to figure that out. I get that to work. I go back out to the market and I'm looking for like chips or something. And then that's when it hit me. And it went from a very happy, positive experience to I'm completely terrified. I have to get out of this room right now. And like I'm gonna cry right now. You know what I mean?
Right. Man.
And so they got me into the car. They got me down south, and I started out at a transitional housing called Amistad in Los Angeles. And shout out to Amistad. That's family right there.
That's cool.
And I started there, and I would say like my first 2 months maybe were just nightmarish internally. It took me 2 weeks to go into a Burlington's. Like it took a week and a half for me to just to go into a Carl's Jr. instead of just going through the drive-through because I couldn't go inside. Like and then that's when I realized that I had years and layers of trauma. And what I was experiencing was PTSD like symptoms.
Oh my goodness.
So, I mean, I was terrified of everything, dude. Like I'm talking old people, kids, too many cars.
I mean, you went from being in solitary confinement to
being Los Angeles.
And then I would, and not
LA.
even to mention the technological curve. Because I'm
had
sure
never
when you
touched
went
a cell
in,
phone in my entire life.
That's what I'm saying. So when you got in, like it probably looked way different than when you got out.
Yeah, we had pagers, man. You know what I mean? So shout out to the pagers, beepers. And I just like, yeah, it was all new and it was terrifying. But eventually it started to get better, and I started to adjust more. And once I did, that's when I took off. That's when all the positive stuff of my story started to happen. And hopefully we'll get into that.
So that's where I want to move now is that you have all this layers and layers, and a lot of people would say, you know what, I'm done. Where most would just throw up their hand to just say either I'm going to take my life or I'm going to start, going to substance abuse and to numb the pain. You chose the opposite route. So one of the things I picked up on you early on when we met was just this story that you had, but the fuel that you use from your story to have your success that you're having now. I want to talk about, so tell me how you got into what you're doing now, because I love, we got to circle back. Cause remember what he said when he first started was you had aspirations of working in Hollywood and you're working in Hollywood right now. And so that's what's so great about this full story, this full circle story is that you started with aspirations. You took a huge detour, but yet you still ended up at your destination. And a lot of times as people, we get so fixated on the detour that we forget about the destination. So tell me about how you didn't forget about that destination and how you still were able to make it to where you wanted to go.
Okay. So I as I started to adjust and acclimate and get a little more comfortable, I was at the office in downtown LA at the time of the Anti-Recidivism Coalition, and a friend of mine who was an intern there at the time, he brought to my attention that there was another organization called Manifest Works, and they had just had like their first session, right? It was a 12-week program, 12 Saturdays, where Manifest Works takes individuals who are system impacted, either through incarceration or homelessness or foster care. We even have had some like homeless military vets go through our program. And you go through these 12 Saturdays and they train you to become a production assistant in the film industry. and that's like getting your foot in the door.
Yeah.
Right. So when he told me that that program existed, I was like, where do I sign
I'm
up?
all-
I didn't
I'm
know
all
this.
over it.
I was like, bro, I'm telling you, like, this is like my oldest dream. Like, I was born for the film industry.
Yeah.
I was born for Hollywood. Like,
Yeah.
always knew it, you know? And I just didn't know that that was still attainable, you know, until someone pointed it out to me. And so I signed up. I went in and I interviewed, and I was in like their second or third session that they had. And it was during that session, during those 12 weeks, I think it was like week 7, I met a production designer who was doing a lot of big music videos. And he liked me. He was like, I could definitely see it. You know, you got that hustle muscle, and you're ready. And
My man Artie was like, Hollywood, baby.
I was
here
like,
I
what's
come.
up, man? Like,
Let's do it.
I was at every single session. Like, there'd be like 15 of us, and I was like, screw these. Listen, I want this.
Yeah, I'm the guy.
Hungry.
I'm the guy.
Yeah. To this day, they tell me I'm hungry. That was like my thing. I'm hungry.
Yeah.
And so he was like, well, I'm gonna feed you then. So he said, why don't you come out this weekend? And just, do you want to take a look at a set? Do you want to just see how it operates? And I was like, cool. So he said, I want you to come. I'm going to be at Paramount. So I was like, all right. I'd never been to Paramount.
Yeah.
So I get to Paramount, and they have this whole area in the back lot. It looks like old New York.
Yeah.
Right? And I show up, and I'm like, man, this is so cool. And he's like, yeah, you ready to go to work? And I was like, oh, man. He actually was inviting me to a job, and I didn't even know that.
Oh,
And
that's cool.
he put me on as a set dresser, and it was a Jennifer Lopez music video.
Oh, my man Artie
Right?
was like, what?
It was Jennifer Lopez.
Hey.
It was the I Ain't Your Mama music video. And I'm not going to lie. She was walking by me. I was walking by her. I said, hey.
He's like, we had a
You
moment.
know, yeah, we had a little moment.
I said, hey. Hey, started from the bottom, now we're here. Hey,
I said, hey. And she said, hey. But she said it like, hey.
That awkward hey.
Hey. And I chose not to see that part, but she definitely was like, who's this guy?
Oh, man. Started
I
from the
didn't
bottom,
know,
now we're here, baby.
It was my first
Two
day. I didn't know
different hays.
you don't talk to talent. I learned
Yeah.
that the first day. So so I started with him, and I went from Jennifer Lopez to John Legend to Fergie, and a couple other groups, and then I started doing some commercials, PAing on commercials, and then eventually, man, an opportunity opened up to go into television, and I went and I interviewed for that job, and I ended up working on the first season of Snowfall on FX, which is shot primarily in South Central LA. So it was through Manifest Works that I got my foot in that door, just to get back to Manifest Works, because since then, it's been a few years now, I have joined the board of directors. I'm a member of the board, and I go back every single session. We're on like group like 7 or 8 now, something like that. I go back, I mentor, I get the next round in. I'm constantly recommending people to the program. It's like one of my personal missions, like yours is bridging the gap between police and community, and mine is like, how many of us can I get into the film industry?
Oh man, let me stop, because I'm hype right now. Like, Artie, you got me hype. If you are a police officer listening to this, Artie is a prime example of why you always need to lead with empathy, and why you can't judge a book by its cover. I don't care what type of crime you've committed or they've committed. He is you, my brother, are a prime example of why we need to just treat human beings for human beings. You know what I mean? Because you are proof to anybody out there struggling, man. You are proof, man, that you can still go out there and do it. It may be a harder road. Like, the road traveled may be difficult, but if you stay in the fight, it's well worth it, man. And man, you got me so hyped right now, because we're living in some dark, grim days as a nation. But there ain't nothing more grimmer than what you just described, because you've talked about, the things that you've done, the loss of life that you have to live with, the being in solitary confinement for years. It don't get much worse than that, but yet, I mean, you show up today, and I'm just so, impacted by you, my brother, and just so overwhelmed with joy because of you, man. So, I mean, I'm kind of just in shock. I mean, AJ, what do you have? Billy?
I'll let Billy go ahead.
No, AJ, you go ahead. I appreciate you, man, being here and being so open with us.
Yeah.
To be honest, I don't have much to add, but I mean also just it's a powerful story. Absolutely.
I appreciate that. You know, I basically went from, and I appreciate that, and I'm honored to be here. Right? We need to have these conversations. We need these like-minded individuals to come together on both sides, because we're gonna need this as things continue to evolve. Yeah, the landscape is gonna change, but we need players on all sides working in concert to make sure it comes out in the re-envisioned framework that everyone's talking about. We all need each other to make that happen.
Yep.
Right? So I'm honored to be here, and I'm glad to contribute to that conversation and to that process. What I wanted to say was that my whole platform is about, and this is what ended up happening. So as I started working in the film industry, I then started to write with my writing partner, right? And I have a writing partner. This is the other side of my branding, you could say, right? This is how I met Brad. We started writing a TV show, a prison TV show called Lemon Grove, right? Which we're still trying to shop. But picture like...
This is and you sent me because I watched it.
No, that's something else.
Oh,
so
okay.
that's my other branding, which is like, I'm just owning the space. I am formerly incarcerated. And
that's cool.
Yeah. So I have like two sides. I work in Hollywood. I'm writing. I want to produce. I want to make movies and shows. Has nothing to do with formerly incarcerated.
Nice.
Then I'm Artie Gonz, formerly incarcerated. Let's shift the culture.
Nice.
And so I created this series, the teaser that I sent to you, called Lessons from a Lifer.
Which was good, by the way.
Thanks. Yeah.
I watched it the other day.
Shout out Blue Light Films.
Me and my wife watched it together, man. She loved it.
Yeah, I mean, my team did a very great job, editing and putting that together. And I'm glad you like it. And basically, Lessons from a Lifer, what I realized was all of the wisdom that you will find from especially ex-lifers is so relatable to the outside world. And there's a depth and there's a level of understanding and compassion and empathy and forgiveness and love and hope and all these things that I feel is so needed out here.
It's needed.
So I was like, how can I share this with the world? Like, how could I connect with a middle-aged white woman living in Texas, or a guy who's having relationship problems out in Rochester, New York, and none of these people have ever been incarcerated, but some of the travails, some of the obstacles and the plight we all have in common with certain approaches and certain wisdoms, right? It's universal is what I'm saying. So I feel with this series, what I would do is I would have someone opposite me. And I always use LeBron James as the example, right? Shout out LeBron James, Laker gang.
Laker gang all day. What's up?
And I would
Ohio.
have yeah, he spent his little time there. So I would have like someone like him, and the topic for that episode would be championship mindset, right? The championship mindset that LeBron James has in preparation for a Lakers season, how he's attacking the season, and how does he get to that trophy at the end, versus championship mindset. I have to change myself. I have to transform, and I have to go through this arduous process to prepare for the parole board, which, by the way, is 4 grueling hours of having your life picked apart and being wrung out like a wet towel. It is the hardest thing you will ever have to go through. So don't ever go through it.
Don't ever go through it.
I don't plan on it. I hope
no
not.
Joke. Yeah. But my thing is, if we can get this series off the ground and go, then what we will show viewers is that we have more in common than we have differences. And even though our struggles may look different, underlying all that is universal wisdom and the approaches, right? And we can all share that. And if you can accept it from me, then that's one step closer to understanding me and us empathizing with each other. So I feel like this series would be transformational in that way. And that's why that's the one thing I'm focusing on the most right now, because I feel like it's so needed during this time.
Boom.
Yeah.
AJ, take it away, bro. Your some of your final thoughts.
Man, okay. Final thoughts. Just to kind of like tie all of this together. We just heard from a man who has gone through what I would consider like the worst of the worst. And here he is today having a conversation. He has a smile on his face. He's extremely optimistic. He's extremely successful. He's still chasing his dreams. He's still achieving his dreams. And it's because he chose to do exactly that. And I feel like a lot of times we as humans, we go through so much that eventually it gets too heavy to bear. So we give up, or we make ourselves victims, right? We go, okay, there's no point in trying. There's no hope. You know, I've been through X, Y, and Z. X, Y, and Z is going to continue to happen to me because I am X, Y, and Z. And just like Artie said, he said that, you know, that was his identity because he surrounded himself with those types of people. But the moment that he decided to break those chains and surround himself with what I would assume to be like-minded people was the time that he really propelled into the sky. So with that said, to tie this into law enforcement, I've spoken to a lot of police officers right now who are playing the victim. And I don't want to say playing the victim because people are going to take that the wrong way, but I'll just say it because I don't know how else to say it. You know, there are a lot of police officers who are like, you know, we can't do anything right. I took this job for the right reasons. I'm not racist. I didn't shoot anybody. I didn't kill anybody. Listen to me when I say this and hear me when I say this. Stop. What are you going to do about it? It would have been easy for Artie to get out of prison and go, you know what? It's done. My dreams of being in Hollywood, my dreams of helping people out who have gone through what I have went through. It's a wash, you know, like I've already been labeled as this. I already consider myself this, but he didn't. He flipped that switch and said, you know what? What am I going to do? How am I going to do it? And then he did it. So if you're a police officer listening to this, if you have a loved one that is a police officer listening to this, just stop. Like, I know it's hard. This is probably one of the hardest times to be a police officer in the history of policing, right? Like, this is worldwide. This isn't just a US thing. This isn't just a Cali thing. This is worldwide. I get it. I know that it's hard. Get it off of your chest. But when it's off of your chest, do something about it. On the flip side of things, we're marching, right? We're protesting. We have the stage. And when I say this, I mean we as minorities, we as community members, we have the stage. We have the platform. What are we going to do now? What are we going to do with it? Let's come up with a call for action, tangible items that we want, okay? One last thing. I can't touch on this enough. There's a lot of hate going on both sides. And this is a prime example of where I'm going with this. We need to see each other in our truest form, which are human beings. You need to not see my uniform. I need to not see your skin color. I need to not see your past convictions. I need to not see your religion. I need to not see your sexual orientation. I need to not see anything when I look at you aside from a human being. In the moment that every single one of us could take a step back and do that will be the moment that we could have these conversations, build these relationships, and actually make change.
Boom. You couldn't have said it any better, bro. Couldn't have said it any better. And along the lines, one last quote. I just had an article that was just published. I wrote an article for this publishing company called Police One. And it was a lot of it because, like AJ said, there's a lot of police officers playing victim right now, which, you know, it sounds harsh, but it's true. Like, instead of playing victim, we need to, you know, I'm not going to say it, but we just need to, you know, toughen up and go out there and do something about it. So the title of the article, and this is what I said, it says, it's not time to turn away. It's time to become a law enforcement change agent. That's what it's about. Like, we need to become change agents. Stop trying to turn away. There's people saying, oh, this is a terrible time. No, this is the time to do it, and this is the time to do it better. That's exactly what you did with your life. You took a bad, crappy situation, and you made it better. And you are living proof that we don't have any excuses.
Yeah. You know, I don't want to take away from the broader, you know, we are having the discussions about qualified immunity and the police unions. So that's happening. And as I said, by more qualified people who are dealing with that right now. And I am focused on what can I do, boots on the ground. So I agree. I would say to a police officer who does feel that way, you know, not as a victim, but almost like, man, I can't do nothing right, and like I'm not racist, and I joined for the right reason. Then great, like jump in, man. Like please, you know, jump in and like and say something. Be willing to call something out. You know, be willing to help with that change and that evolution, and reach across the aisle, right? And I think if more and more of that happens, then we start to see some of the reforms work. Certainly we need the bigger things to be dealt with, and that's going to work out the way that it works out. But I'm not sitting there on a panel talking about these huge, bigger issues, so I have to do what I can in the moment. And honestly, here's what I'm going to leave you guys with. This is a lesson from a lifer for my two new cop friends, right?
That's the title of the podcast, by the way, Lessons from a Lifer.
Yeah, this is a lesson from a lifer. So everything about me behaviorally takes place because I went in and I started to work on my beliefs and my attitudes, the way I perceive the world. It influenced my thoughts and my feelings, which came out in action, right? So the more that I changed here, the less that I did criminally, negatively. Like I didn't want to harm anybody anymore, and I didn't want to steal, I didn't want to rob, I didn't, you know, all of the behaviors were affected by my belief system by changing it. So when I put on my uniform, I see the world through a certain lens that affects my compassion and willingness and all that good stuff. I feel like you two are the same way. I feel that you guys put your uniforms on and you see policing through a certain lens. We're seeing a lot of videos right now about people being trained like sheepdog, wolf, you know, all that stuff that's out now. And the accusation is you're being trained to be predators. And then us, we're prey, right? You may or may not agree with that, but I can say that what it made me think of is, but guys like Ryan, like you guys are putting your uniform on, you're seeing policing through a certain lens. And even though I've never been on a ride along with either of you, I can guarantee that when you guys respond to a call or you have interaction even with a suspect, that it is much different than what we saw with Derek Chauvin, right? Because when you put on the uniform, you're seeing the world through a different lens.
Exactly right.
Where Derek Chauvins of the world put on a uniform and they're seeing the world through a prism of fear and hate and predator, you know.
You're exactly right.
And like, so if we can start to shift the culture and attack our beliefs and really challenge them and like delve in, and imagine if all police officers did the work I did to get myself out, and they did that for themselves. And then everyone who put on that uniform, I'm still going to do my job. If I got to link you, I'm still going to link you. But you're not a prey and I'm not a predator.
Exactly.
Right? So I know that they would have more experiences like the ones you guys have when you pull people over.
Yeah, exactly. Without a doubt. And what you just described, I have a life verse was in my house. It's Romans 12:2. It says, don't be conformed to the world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, so that you will present yourself a living sacrifice. That has been my life verse, because when it changed for me, it says, don't be conformed to the rest of the world. The rest of the world wants us to be a certain way, but be transformed by the renewing of that mind. That renewing of that mind occurs every single day, because it says from the heart, the mouth speaks. And from the heart, if I have hate, evil, racism, whatever it is going to come out of my mouth. But the only way to change what's in my heart is by renewing my mind every single day. Man, Artie, where could they find you at?
You can find me at Artie Gonz. Definitely come follow me. I'm certainly trying to elevate that. 182. That's lofty.
It's lofty for us too.
Can you just spell that out real quick for everybody?
Yeah. So you can follow me at Artie Gonz on Instagram. ARTIEGONZ. And we are also working on our pages for Lessons from a Lifer, which I will be letting people know about, my followers know about pretty soon. But stay tuned for content, you know.
Cool. Hey, I'm trying to get on set. I'm trying to be on set with Artie. I'm like, hey, no, cut. No, redo that.
Hey, one last thing, because I have to say it. You know, when you were sharing your story when you were in isolation, and you said, for some reason, like this light came down and it hit my hand. I'm gonna just tell you, man, like what I believe that reason was, man, or what I believe that was. that was our Savior doing what he does, and that was
I
saving.
agree. I
So,
agree.
Just throw that out there
I
for
agree,
you, brother.
man. And man,
Thank you, bro.
Artie, bro, I love you, bro. We ain't even like I said. This is a new friendship, and I when I say that, bro, I mean it. Like I love you, man. You're a brother, man, to me, AJ, Billy.
We
Yeah.
have some stuff we've been talking about we want to do later.
We
for
definitely,
sure.
we
Yeah.
definitely, I always say this when we have good podcast guests on, we got to get you back on because
Get you back, yeah.
there's just so much to unpack in an hour and a half. And I literally, like in 5 minutes, I got to do a live session with somebody else on Instagram. So, but we had to have you on, bro. I appreciate
Yeah.
you driving out.
Thanks for having me.
So, hey guys, if you guys enjoyed this episode, please comment, tell us what you guys thought of it. The most important thing is continue to give us those reviews, 5-star reviews, ratings, whatever you name it. I'm going to tell you now, we're looking at the numbers and we are having a record month. AJ just pulled up right before we got on this podcast that we're number 7 in the top 10 government podcasts around right now. So that is crazy right there. Our downloads are astronomical right now. So if you enjoy this podcast, please keep continuing to share it because again, you know, we need you to spread this message. So we love you guys and we'll see y'all next week.
Peace.
Peace. Look at that.
Hey,
Look at that.
hey, hey.
Double peace.